Hey, before we dive into this, I want to be very clear. I'm not trying to make you believe something blindly. I'm not pushing propaganda. I'm not asking you to choose a side. I'm just offering a perspective, a one that's almost always left out of the conversation. Just think of this like hanging out and hearing another side of the story, like when you hear a friend out, even if everyone else is saying they're wrong. You might walk away still thinking they're wrong, but at least now you know why they did what they did. So, Russia. Yeah, that word alone triggers a lot, right? The media, the politics, the old Cold War vibes, the James Bond villains, the news flashes, all of it comes together to form an image. And here's the kicker. Most of that image isn't even created by Russia. It's crafted by narratives. Narratives told through selective stories, edited headlines, cropped history. But what happens if we try to reset for just a few minutes? What if we let go of the idea that there's a clear good guy and bad guy? Let's go back to basics. After World War II, the Soviet Union wasn't just a country, it was a survivor. It lost over 27 million people. Think about that number. It's bigger than many countries' entire populations today. Cities turned to dust, families wiped out, trauma passed down generations. So when the Cold War started, it wasn't just about ideology, it was survival instinct. And when the Cold War ended, Russia thought it was stepping into a safer, more cooperative world. That didn't quite happen. See, Russia was told, not in formal treaties, but in handshakes and understandings, that NATO wouldn't expand eastward. But look at a map today. From Russia's point of view, NATO just kept getting closer. Imagine if someone kept moving their stuff closer to your bedroom door, saying, "Don't worry, I'm not coming in." Wouldn't you eventually put a lock on that door? Now let's talk about Ukraine. I know, hot topic, but slow down. Ukraine isn't just a neighbor to Russia, it's part of its soul, in a way. Shared history, shared religion, even shared language. Kiev was the birthplace of Russian civilization. For many Russians, losing Ukraine feels like losing a limb. And when, in 2014, a Western-leaning government took over after a very murky revolution, some say protest, some say coup, Russia saw a red line crossed. That doesn't mean every action they took was perfect, far from it. But try to understand what it felt like to them. Imagine if China funded protests in Canada and helped overthrow their government, and suddenly Canada joined a Chinese military alliance. How would America feel? Seriously, just answer that in your head. You see, Russia has always been a land of defense. Not offense, defense. Historically, every time it let its guard down, it got invaded. Napoleon, Hitler, even the Mongols. So Russians live with this generational trauma. Their military mindset is never again. Their foreign policy? Stay cautious. It's not paranoia if it keeps happening. Now, I know some of you might say, but what about the invasion? What about Crimea? Again, I'm not excusing, I'm explaining. Crimea is ethnically majority Russian. It was part of Russia until 1954, when Khrushchev, a Ukrainian himself, handed it over to Ukraine, mostly as a symbolic gesture because, well, they were the same country back then under the USSR. So when things got messy in 2014, Russia didn't see it as a land grab. They saw it as reclaiming what was always theirs, protecting ethnic Russians who didn't want to be part of a NATO-leaning Ukraine. Still with me? Good, because this is where things get psychological. Ever heard of confirmation bias? That's when we only accept information that confirms what we already believe. Most people watching the news already believe Russia is the bad guy, so they filter everything through that lens. That's not truth. That's emotional editing. Then there's something called anchoring. First impressions stick. If your first understanding of Russia came from action movies, where the villain always had a thick Russian accent and a nuclear bomb, that becomes your anchor. Breaking that anchor takes work. Now here's a little twist. Have you ever heard of the Karpman drama triangle? It's a model of human interaction. There's a victim, a villain, and a hero. But here's the trick. Those roles rotate. Sometimes the villain thinks he's the victim. Sometimes the hero becomes the aggressor. Once you see that, you start asking deeper questions. Who's playing what role, and who wrote the script? Let's also talk about something called the illusion of moral superiority. It's a psychological trick our minds play on us. We assume our side is always the more ethical one, but history proves otherwise. Every nation, including the West, has done questionable things. Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan. So when we judge Russia harshly, are we being honest or just protective of our own narrative? Now let me throw in a human layer here. I've spoken to Russians, just ordinary people, students, artists, programmers, and you know what? They're just like us. They want peace, they want food on the table, they want a future. They don't wake up thinking, how can we be evil today? The idea that a whole nation is evil is just lazy thinking. And here's the clincher. Every government in the world hides things. It's not a Russia-only thing. But because of the echo chamber of the internet, we hear one side so loud, so often, that we forget there even is another side. And that's not how truth works. Truth is a puzzle, not a tweet. Now think about this. Whenever someone says Russia is the villain, ask them why. Like really, why? Not what CNN said, not what Twitter said, their own answer. Most people stumble. That's not because they're dumb, it's because they've never had to think about it. That's the power of the dominant narrative. It becomes invisible. Now I know someone might say, are you defending everything Russia does? Nope, I'm just saying, understand it before you condemn it. Because when you understand something, even if you still disagree, your thinking becomes sharper, your arguments get better, your heart stays open. And look, I'm not asking you to become pro-Russia, I'm asking you to be pro-truth. Or at least pro-curiosity. Ask the questions nobody asks. Why would a country act this way? What pressures do they feel? What threats do they perceive? When you do that, you become smarter than 90% of people just blindly reposting hashtags. Let me wrap with this. Russia is not a monster. It's a country with a complicated past, a proud culture, a defensive mindset, and yes, some very real mistakes. But if we always treat it like an enemy, guess what? That's exactly what it'll become. Instead of feeding conflict, maybe it's time we fed understanding. No one wins a Cold War, but everyone benefits from warm truth. And that wraps up today's video. If you learned something new, had fun, or just enjoyed the vibe, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss what's next on Primark Studios Bloodline. Got thoughts, questions, or cool ideas? Drop them in the comments. I read everyone. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, and as always, keep creating, keep exploring, and keep the bloodline strong. This is Primark Studios Bloodline, signing off. See you in the next one.